Picture this. You're standing at the base of a tree so massive that 5 grown men holding hands couldn't wrap around it. It rises 280 feet into the sky, its lowest branches higher than a 6-story building. This giant sprouted from the soil before Shakespeare wrote his first play. And your job? To cut it down using nothing but hand tools and raw determination. This was the reality for loggers in the late 1800s and early 1900s. No chainsaws, no hydraulics. Just men, steel, and an almost suicidal level of courage. The question isn't just how they did it, it's why anyone would even try. The trees of the Pacific Northwest weren't just big. They were monuments to time itself. Western hemlock, Douglas fir, and Sitka spruce dominated these ancient forests. Some had been growing since the Middle Ages. A logger in 1890 might fell a Douglas fir that was already 50 feet tall when Columbus landed in the Americas. These weren't trees in the way we think of them today. They were ecosystems unto themselves, hosting birds, insects, and entire communities of moss and lichen in their upper branches. The dimensions defied belief. Trunks commonly measured 8 to 15 feet in diameter at chest height. The wood was so dense that a single tree could yield 10,000 board feet of lumber, enough to build an entire house. But accessing that lumber meant confronting something that had survived centuries of storms, fires, and floods. Walking into these forests felt like entering a cathedral. The canopy blocked so much light that the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. Ferns grew waist-high. Fallen logs, themselves larger than most modern trees, slowly decomposed over decades, becoming nurseries for new growth. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch or the call of a raven. For the men who came to cut these giants, the forest wasn't just intimidating, it was hostile, and every tree was a potential killer. America's industrial explosion demanded timber on a scale never seen before. The Transcontinental Railroad alone consumed forests worth of trees. Each mile of track required between 2,500 and 3,000 wooden railroad ties. With the nation building thousands of miles of new railways every year, the math became staggering. A single year of railroad construction in the 1880s could consume timber from over 100,000 trees. But railroads were just the beginning. Growing cities needed millions of board feet for everything. Wharves jutting into harbors, warehouses storing grain and goods, sidewalks elevated above muddy streets, and homes for waves of immigrants pouring into urban centers. Mining operations depended on timber shoring up their tunnels. The deeper they dug for gold, silver, and copper, the more beams they needed to prevent collapses. A single large mine might consume thousands of trees just to keep its tunnels safe. Then came the fires. When disaster struck, the appetite for lumber became desperate. After Chicago's Great Fire in 1871 destroyed over 17,000 buildings, lumber poured in from forests across the Great Lakes and the Pacific Northwest. The city's reconstruction consumed timber at rates that would have seemed impossible just years before. San Francisco faced similar devastation after its 1906 earthquake and fire. Rebuilding required an endless stream of lumber, and the Pacific forests supplied it. This demand created a simple equation: whoever could deliver timber fastest would profit most, and that meant finding men willing to face the giants. The crosscut saw was the logger's primary weapon, though calling it a weapon feels generous. These saws stretched anywhere from 6 to 12 feet in length, their blades studded with specially designed teeth. Each tooth was filed to precise angles, cutting teeth that sliced wood fibers, and raker teeth that cleared sawdust from the cut. A good saw required constant maintenance. Dull teeth meant wasted effort and dangerous binding. Sharp teeth meant efficient cutting, but filing them correctly took skill and patience. 2 men worked each saw, one on either end, pulling in alternating rhythm. The technique sounds simple, but demanded perfect coordination. Pull too hard and you'd buckle the blade. Push instead of letting your partner pull, and you'd create friction that overheated the metal. The saw cut only on the pull stroke, which meant half your motion was wasted effort. Good sawyers developed an almost musical rhythm, their bodies swaying in sync as the saw whispered through the wood. But the saw was worthless without the axe. Before any sawing began, loggers used double-bit axes to chop notches into the tree. These notches served 2 purposes. They created pockets for springboards, and they determined where the tree would fall. A poorly aimed undercut could send a tree sideways into its neighbors, creating a deadly mess of tangled timber called a widowmaker. The springboards themselves were marvels of simple engineering. Each board, typically 6 to 8 feet long and about 6 inches wide, had a metal shod end that wedged into the chopped notch. The other end extended outward, creating a narrow platform. Loggers would stand on these boards, sometimes 10 feet above ground, working their saw through the trunk. The boards flexed and bounced with each movement, adding an extra layer of danger to an already perilous job. Working this high served a practical purpose. The base of old-growth trees often flared outward into thick buttresses. These buttressed sections contained irregular grain and hidden rot. By cutting higher up, loggers accessed cleaner, straighter wood that was easier to saw and more valuable at the mill. Every piece of equipment mattered. Wedges, usually made of hardwood or soft metal, were driven into the back, cut to prevent the saw from binding and to help direct the tree's fall. Sledgehammers for pounding wedges, files for sharpening, kerosene for cleaning pitch from saw blades. Even the faller's boots were specialized with caulks, small metal spikes, driven into the soles for grip on wet bark and slippery springboards. Felling a giant wasn't just labor, it was applied physics, psychology, and a healthy respect for violent death. The process began with assessment. A good faller circled the tree multiple times, reading subtle clues. Which way did it lean? Even a slight lean could determine everything. Was there wind, and if so, which direction and how strong? Where were the neighboring trees? A giant that hung up in its neighbors became a deadly puzzle called a lodgepole, requiring dangerous work to bring down. Experienced fallers developed an eye for hidden dangers. They'd tap the trunk with an axe handle, listening for the hollow thump that indicated rot. They'd scan the crown for dead branches that might break loose during the fall. They'd examine the bark for scarring that suggested previous lightning strikes or fire damage. Only after this examination did the real work begin. Using axes, both men would chop springboard notches into opposite sides of the trunk, typically 6 to 10 feet above ground. The notches had to be level with each other. A difference of even a few inches made standing on the boards treacherous. Once the springboards were in place, the undercut began. This V-shaped notch, chopped into the side facing the intended fall direction, determined where the tree would go. The undercut needed to be deep, typically about 1/3 through the trunk's diameter, and precisely angled. Too shallow and the tree might split vertically. Too steep and it might kick backward. The geometry mattered more than muscle. With the undercut complete, the sawyers mounted their springboards and began the back cut. This horizontal cut started on the opposite side of the tree, several inches above the bottom of the undercut. As the saw bit deeper, it left a thin column of wood called the hinge. This hinge was everything. Too thick and the tree wouldn't fall. Too thin and it might snap prematurely, sending the tree in an unpredictable direction. As the back cut progressed, the sawyers watched and listened. Wood fibers began to crack and pop. The tree might sway slightly, testing its balance. This was the moment of truth. Experienced fallers could hear the change in pitch, as the saw moved through the last inches of wood. They knew exactly when to pull the saw free, grab their axes, and jump clear of the springboards. When a giant finally committed to falling, the sound was apocalyptic. The hinge snapped with a crack like cannon fire. The crown, sometimes weighing tens of thousands of pounds, accelerated downward. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground. Branches exploded, bark flew like shrapnel, and for a few seconds, sawdust and debris filled the air like fog. If everything went right, the tree lay where planned, ready for buckers to cut it into manageable sections. But things didn't always go right. The forest kept detailed records of its victims. Camp ledgers and newspaper accounts document the brutal arithmetic of hand logging. In one particularly deadly season in Washington state during 1910, logging accidents killed over 120 men. Many deaths weren't recorded at all. Some camps simply noted crushed by timber, with no name attached. The dangers came from every direction. Trees could split unexpectedly, their trunks exploding under internal tension. Widowmakers, those dead branches lurking in the canopy, would break loose during a fall and plummet like spears. Trees would hang up in their neighbors, creating suspended dangers that could drop without warning days later. One common disaster was the chair split, different from the barber chair, but equally deadly. As a tree began to fall, its weight sometimes caused the trunk to split horizontally at the hinge point. The falling portion would slide backward along this split, crushing anyone who hadn't retreated far enough. Experienced fallers knew to cut and run, never watching their work complete its fall. Springboards themselves were hazards. The notches that held them were chopped quickly, often in awkward positions. A board that seemed solid could pull free without warning, dropping a man onto whatever lay below. Rocks, other springboards, or the sharp angles of felled timber. Loggers learned to test their boards constantly, bouncing on them to ensure the metal shoe was firmly seated. Weather multiplied every risk. Rain made bark slippery and boards treacherous. Wind turned predictable falls into chaos. Fog obscured the crown, hiding widowmakers until they struck. Winter ice transformed the forest into a maze of slippery surfaces. Perhaps worst was the economic reality behind these dangers. Logging companies paid by the board foot. Men who moved faster earned more, creating constant pressure to cut corners on safety. Camp bosses pushed for production. Fallers who took time to be cautious earned less than those who took risks. The system rewarded speed over caution, and men paid with their lives. When Andreas Still introduced the first gasoline-powered chainsaw in 1929, it weighed 140 pounds and required 2 men to operate. It was loud, temperamental, and broke down constantly. But it could cut through wood at speeds that made the misery whip look primitive. The early chainsaws weren't immediately adopted. They were expensive, required maintenance skills most loggers didn't have, and broke down in the wet conditions of Pacific Northwest forests. Many old-timers dismissed them as unreliable toys. But by the late 1940s, chainsaws had improved dramatically. Single-operator models weighing under 50 pounds became common. A tree that once took 6 hours to fell with hand tools could drop in 30 minutes. Production exploded. Logging camps that once employed 50 men could do the same work with 15. The change wasn't entirely positive. The skill that separated great fallers from mediocre ones mattered less when machines did the cutting. The careful reading of wood grain, the precise filing of saw teeth, the rhythm developed between partners, all became obsolete. Logging transformed from a craft into something closer to industrial demolition. The old-growth forests fell faster than anyone imagined possible. Slopes that would have taken decades to clear with hand tools were stripped in years. Drive through the Pacific Northwest today, and you'll occasionally spot them. Old stumps enormous and weathered, with square notches carved into their sides. These notches, where springboards once rested, are the only monuments to the men who cut these giants by hand. Less than 5% of the original old-growth forest remains. Most of what we see now is second or third growth, trees that seem large until you realize they're children compared to what stood before. The remaining ancient forests are protected now, preserved in national parks and wilderness areas, living museums of what once covered millions of acres. The loggers who felled these trees weren't villains. They were workers responding to American demand for lumber, men trying to earn wages in one of the few jobs available in remote regions. The real story isn't about destroying forests. It's about what happens when industrial appetite meets finite resources. Those notched stumps remind us that every stick of timber in every old building came at enormous cost. Not just environmental cost, though that was real, but human cost. Men standing on flexing boards, gambling with gravity, working in rhythm with partners whose lives depended on their skill. They cut down 300-year-old trees with hand tools because their country demanded it. They developed techniques that seem impossible today. They died at rates that would shut down any modern industry. And they left behind a landscape transformed, forests gone, and the eternal question, what are we willing to sacrifice for progress?